Last week, we had SvelteKit 3 and Solid 2 being released as release candidates. So not fully stable yet, but almost. And a couple of years ago, this would have been an interesting thing. You would have seen a bunch of videos about it, including by me, of course, maybe even a course. And the question nowadays is, does that still matter? Do new frameworks still matter at all? Or new framework versions as we have it here? Or does it not matter because with AI, it's all about React anyways, right? And why would you even care? I mean, if AI writes so much code, maybe all your code, why would you care about the underlying framework or library? And I'd say you should care quite a bit, and new frameworks and libraries do matter, but of course, gaining traction, I believe, is much, much harder than it used to be. And it was never particularly easy necessarily, but it may be worse now. But let's dig in. Now, I will not take a closer look at what exactly these frameworks or versions are about. I will link the official announcement blog posts though, so you can dive into that. But I will say that both are pretty interesting, and indeed, I plan on using SvelteKit 3 specifically in some of my new projects, internal projects for now, to see how well it works with AI, because that is important. One reason against these new frameworks, or against the importance of new frameworks that speaks against it, would be that AI has a favorite stack. And that, of course, is React and so on. So React and Next.js maybe, etc. And that is true. That is definitely the case. But AI is pretty good at working with new, unknown things too, as it turns out, if you as the developer give it the right context. And that is not to be underestimated. Of course, if you're just vibing away and you're not steering AI in any way and you don't care about any decisions it makes, so if you're vibe coding, which can be fine for certain one-off projects or throwaway software, but if you're doing that, then of course, yeah, it'll not know what SvelteKit version 3 is necessarily, and you wouldn't care about it. You wouldn't even tell AI to use that version. So obviously, yeah, new frameworks or libraries in general don't have a place in that world. But it's not all about vibe coding, obviously. It has its place, and I don't know which role vibe coding will play in a few years, and what all these tech choices will play, if that will still matter in a few years. But right now, you can definitely get a lot out of actually steering AI. That's kind of an understatement. You should be steering AI. Our role as developers simply is changing. We still should be controlling what we build and how we build it, and that we don't write the code anymore necessarily does not mean that we should not care about the code, the architecture, the decisions we make. That is as important as ever, or maybe more important than ever before. I think the reasons for picking a framework over another are different now. You know, back in 2019 and so on, one major reason for picking a certain framework, amongst others, of course, was the developer experience. Do you have a good time working with it as a developer? Obviously, that mattered. You would be spending a lot of time writing code in a certain framework or with a certain library. So obviously, you want to have a good time. Now, of course, you don't always have that choice. You may be employed somewhere where you are simply forced to use a certain framework or library. But as a developer, depending on the company where you're working, and especially, of course, if you're self-employed, you can have, and you could have, most importantly, some leverage and some impact on how decisions are made and which technologies are used. So definitely it mattered back then if a framework has good developer ergonomics, if it has a good, or if it offers a good developer experience. That was not the only thing, of course. Back then already performance mattered, bundle size mattered. Then there are other things that may matter. For example, how easy or hard is it to do server-side rendering with a given framework, if we're talking about JavaScript front-end frameworks, and so on. So lots of important aspects, but the developer experience aspects are less important now. I would say developer experience doesn't really matter anymore. Now, what will matter is the AI experience. I don't know what we call that. Is it AX? That, of course, matters a lot. And things like the performance and the bundle size and all that stuff also still matters, of course. And I would argue you could say with AI now, because AI is so fast at spitting out code, obviously, it may actually matter less which framework you use. Switching is easier than it used to be, and you can therefore really see and take a look at which aspects matter for the app, the project you're working on, what's most important for you, and then find the best framework or library for that and just use that. And you don't have to care about developer experience or anything like that. And I would say you don't even have to care as much about the ecosystem anymore. The ecosystem, of course, still matters. It is a factor. For example, if you're working with React, you're obviously buying into a huge ecosystem. You have Schwarzmüller, you have a bunch of other libraries, but one aspect that matters less, of course, unfortunate for me, but that matters less, is the amount of tutorials you have on a technology, because again, you may not be writing the code yourself anymore. So that's one aspect that's not as important anymore. And also the other part of the ecosystem, the libraries and so on, yeah, sure, it's nice to have that, but AI is pretty good at just building whatever you want it to build. And if you want your own Schwarzmüller for Svelte, and I know there already is a Schwarzmüller for Svelte, but if you wanted to build your own version of a library that exists for React but not for your favorite framework, you can just ask AI to do it. You can just ask AI to fork some popular React library and port it to your favorite framework. Now, that will not be worth the effort for every little side demo project you're building, but for bigger projects, it very well may be. You can do stuff like that. So actually, I would say the ecosystem still matters, but is less important than it used to be. Now, what matters though, and I mentioned this before, is the AI experience, you could say. And what do I mean with that? There are probably different things you could mean here. What I mean is, how easy is it for AI to learn or understand the thing, the framework, the library you want it to work with? And how much does this framework force AI to write good code? And I'll give you an example. There is Effect. Now, Effect is not a JavaScript frontend framework, but it nonetheless is a JavaScript or a TypeScript library designed to help developers easily create complex synchronous and asynchronous programs. You can, for example, use it on the backend. It has a bunch of stuff included. It's really amazing. And one thing that makes Effect amazing, and probably one of the reasons why it is popular in a certain niche right now, at least, is the fact that it comes with a lot of rules that are actively enforced and that will yell at you if you're, or the AI, are writing the wrong code, if you're violating certain, well, rules of the Effect library. Because it's a TypeScript library, it heavily embraces TypeScript, it does a lot of type checking and a lot of other stuff that can really force you to follow a certain set of rules, to write your programs in a certain way. And of course, when working with AI, anything that enforces rules and that yells at AI if it invents stuff or if it tries to break out of those rules, anything like that can be good. And that's one aspect of a good AI experience, I would say. Working with a library or a framework that enforces certain rules and that basically minimizes the amount of mistakes you can make or the amount of variance you can have in your code, if you want to put it like that. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is how easy it is for AI to learn something. And here it's, of course, all about the docs. Because I mentioned earlier that with AI, you have something that is pretty good at working with new unknown things too. Sure, it has all that baked in knowledge about React, but to some degree you could even argue that this is a bad thing because it learned a lot of bad patterns from all these public repositories. But you just have to point AI at the right docs pages or give it the right skill, and it can do pretty well at working with a certain technology. I'm doing that all the time. I'm using AI with new versions of libraries or frameworks. I'm using it with Effect, for example, which is not new, but version 4 is new. I'm using it with something called Alchemy, which is an infrastructure as cloud solution, which is pretty new. And you just give it the docs, or what I like to do, I ask AI to do some in-depth research. I give it some initial docs and ask it to dive deeper, and then I ask it to build a skill which I can dump into the projects where I'm working with a certain library, and the results are really good. And for all these reasons, long story short, I think new framework and library versions still matter a lot. Or not just new versions, of course, entire new libraries and frameworks matter a lot. But the reasons shifted to some degree. As mentioned, things like performance and so on will always matter because ultimately you're hopefully building products for the end user. And the end user could be you if it's an internal tool or something like that, but still, you want something that is fast, that doesn't crash all the time, so that all matters. But then, in addition to that, what matters today is how well does a certain framework or library work with AI. And that, of course, changes how these frameworks and libraries are developed or should be developed, and what the priorities of the developers behind these frameworks should be. They should really try to build something that forces AI to work in a certain way and that minimizes the amount of mistakes AI can make. Because ultimately, what we're of course kind of trying to do here is we're trying to force a non-deterministic thing, AI, into kind of a deterministic world to get the best of both worlds, to get the flexibility and speed of AI, but avoid it going totally rogue and spitting out horrible code. And yeah, new frameworks and libraries, I think, play an important role here. And therefore, learning these frameworks and libraries certainly has changed. You as a developer will most likely not spend hours on a huge course to learn a new framework or library. You will probably, and you should probably, I certainly do, spend some time to pick up the basics with the docs, with a YouTube video, with a course. Of course, that is also changing. I'm changing what I'm producing because I believe in order to efficiently work with something, no matter what it is, through AI, you need to have a basic understanding of the thing you're working with. You need to understand what to ask AI for, what to watch out for, potential pitfalls, best practices, and so on. So that is certainly changing how you learn things and how you decide what to use, but that does not mean that the innovation around frameworks and libraries wouldn't matter anymore. I think it matters more than ever because I think there is a lot of empty space and room for innovation, for frameworks that give AI clearer rules, and of course, always for frameworks, libraries, tools that allow us to build faster, more performant, more error-free, and so on applications. Because ultimately, as I mentioned, that is what we all should be trying to do with or without AI.